This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it! It's the best thing going today.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 55 of the Top Rope Nation podcast here on the air. I am Ryan Drosty of PopCulture.com, joined by Kyle Ross and Justin Joint, here to talk all things professional wrestling. This has been a huge week in the world of pro wrestling. We got to talk WWE Superstar Shakeup. Definitely got to hit on Bruno Sammartino, which has been kind of a sad note this week, but a good chance to kind of relive a legendary career. So we're going to talk about him. But first off, I got to talk to my guys. Justin, what's going on tonight? How are you doing?
I'm good. The baby started teething, so I'm kind of on edge right now, waiting for him to wake up. But I'm ready to talk some wrestling with my buddies.
Oh yeah, Kyle.
Yes, teething. Yes, we've got a couple teeth in our little girl as well. But hopefully, I'm flying solo in the house with the baby this week, so hopefully that my loud voice does not wake her up, and I do not have to. Go be like John Cena at WrestleMania and just bolt all of a sudden. I think I should be okay.
If you hear some crying in the background, it's not Kyle reacting to Raw's Superstar Shakeup draft picks. It is the baby in the background. Yes. So we'll be talking about that, Raw versus SmackDown.
I was going to say, the monitor is literally like a foot from the mic, so I don't know if that's the best. Most professional thing in the world, but whatever.
I'm still dealing with teething with a 2.5-year-old, and it is not fun. So Godspeed to both of you, gotta say. You're just beginning.
Also a foot from the mic, or less than a foot now, in my hand is a very lovely glass of scotch, which will, I believe, make this program even better than it should be on paper.
Oh yeah, I like it. I like your style, my man. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. By the way, check out our archive, topropenation.com. You can check out all 54 past episodes of the show, most of them pretty damn good. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, and leave us a rating on iTunes. 5 stars if you like what we hear or what you hear. I think you will. So, guys, we got to talk about Bruno Sammartino and his death this week, which stunned some people, I think. I mean, obviously Bruno was getting up there in age, but I think most people thought he'd be around a little bit longer than he was, unfortunately. One of the biggest stars in professional wrestling history, no doubt about it.
Yes.
Longest title reign in the history of the WWE. Was it 8 years, I believe, Kyle?
Yeah, the first one, yeah.
8 years. Altogether, like 11 years, I think, between 2 reigns, which is just insane to think about.
Yeah, that's like Cy Young's win total in baseball. That ain't getting broken.
No.
Well, I guess the cumulative one could be, but yeah, nobody's in this day and age. It is impossible for somebody to hold the title for 8 straight years.
You're right, because I think Hogan had it for about 4 years when he lost in the 80s, and I think that's probably the second longest.
There's been none longer since then. Backlund had it longer than Hogan did.
Okay.
But yeah, Hogan was just over 4. He won it in January of '84 and lost it in February of '88. Since then, like, nobody's had it for long. I mean, what was it? I think like CM Punk is the longest.
Yeah, I think Punk is the longest in the modern era.
Yeah, I mean, so other than that, I mean, no one's even topped 1.5 years. And Punk was in the. Yeah, they were still doing the 2 titles then, right?
Were they?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, they were.
Yes, they were. They sold the 2 titles then too. So like even then, like that kind of comes with a caveat.
That's right, because him and Bryan had the belts at the same time.
Yes.
At one point,
there was that picture. Wasn't like Evan Bourne, and they had like all that picture of like the least likely WWE champions of all time. I remember that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Bruno kind of is the guy who helped Vince McMahon's father, really take the promotion, at the time, the WWF, to the next level. And one of the biggest sports stars of the 1960s. Definitely has had a tumultuous relationship with Vince McMahon and the company over the years. I would just start out by saying If you guys aren't a subscriber to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer has an excellent bio on Sammartino this week because Dave was pretty close to Bruno, so he's got some pretty interesting inside stories on Bruno, especially here in his later years. And I've really enjoyed reading it. But Kyle, what are your thoughts on the passing of Bruno Sammartino?
Well, yeah, that bio was so good. I saw somebody wrote on Twitter that Dave's bio was so good it made you forget about that stupid tweet he had the day before, earlier in the day.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too. That was kind of in bad taste. Like, I mean, I know Dave's like a big fact check guy, but I mean, honestly, the day that Bruno passed away,
he could have included it in the bio. Whatever, it's water under the bridge. It's not something that I want to rehash or argue or whatever.
If you're not sure what we're talking about, it was in regards to how many times Bruno actually sold out Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and Dave's like, Bruno was my friend, but I have to point out that this sellout streak that everyone's been quoting in these articles is wrong.
It's like kind of an odd thing to say on the day the guy passed away.
It kind of reeked of, hey, look how much smarter I am than the mainstream outlets. But whatever, it was fine. Dave's bio was really good. I was anticipating it being good, and it actually exceeded my expectations. So kudos to that. You hit the nail on the head with Bruno. We have to talk about just how important he was to this promotion. Inarguably, he's one of the three most important performers in the history of the promotion.
Oh yeah, he's going on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument for him being number one. I'm probably not that person who could do it, but there's an argument there. He's certainly the most important of the Vince Senior era. There's no debating that whatsoever, and there would not be a WWE today without Bruno Sammartino. I mean, I was thinking in terms of like an apples to apples comparison, who you could compare him to. And like Vern Gagne was the name that came into my mind simply for the reason, and Bruno compares favorably to Vern, by the way. I think that's something that everyone would agree on. But just in the sense that, both the WWF and the AWA split from the NWA in the 60s, and were essentially just built around, the one champion. Now, Vern would lose the title more than Bruno did in the AWA, but both were regional kind of promotions at the time. Not kind of, they were. WWF was still regional. But, he was absolutely, Bruno, responsible for the WWF, thriving throughout the 70s, when that was kind of a real roll of the dice move to ostracize themselves from the NWA. Now, I know they kind of went back for a time, but, Bruno put that promotion on the map, and he had an emotional connection with the fans, that no one today has. I mean, it was back then, it was about going to Madison Square Garden or wherever, the Boston Garden, wanting to see Bruno win. It wasn't about performance per se. So people talked about the cage matches. WWF, was the one who did the escape the cage rules. And that was all done for Bruno, where he just beat the dog shit out of the heel and he'd walk out. That was all set up for him. That's why they had escape the cage rules. So again, I don't see how anyone could claim he is any worse than the third most important person in history of the promotion. I mean, Hogan and Austin came about at times. Hogan, right when the company was going national. Austin company was obviously had been national for a long time, but the three of them are head and shoulders above everybody else in the history of the promotion in terms of importance.
Justin, so as far as your knowledge of Bruno Sammartino goes, I think we're kind of on the same page here. I know a little bit about Bruno. Obviously didn't grow up at the time to watch him, and I've done some research before the show to kind of catch myself up to speed. I understand his importance to the history of WWE, but as far as like his matches go, I'm only familiar with a couple of them. What was your knowledge level of Bruno Sammartino and your appreciation for one of the greatest of all time?
Well, as kind of the layman mark of the podcast, if it happened before Cyndi Lauper, I'm not really all that interested. But I will say, what I know of Bruno Sammartino is that before there was John Cena, before there was Hulk Hogan, there was Bruno. In the the group I think he was really most important to, especially in New York, was the immigrant population. If you look on Twitter, you'll see a lot of people like even Bruno Mars, who points out that, their dad was a huge Bruno Sammartino fan. So he really resonated with that crowd and really the whole melting pot of New York. And you really couldn't have picked a better superstar for the WWF back then to lead the company.
It's where Bruno Mars got his name, in fact.
Yeah.
Named after Bruno Sammartino. So I did see that Bruno Mars sent out a tweet. That was pretty cool of him to do. Yeah, I mean, Bruno, obviously, he's kind of a Northeastern legend, especially in his hometown of Pittsburgh. Listener of the show, Anthony Valvo. I used to work with him at WrestleView.com. He is a big-time Bruno Sammartino fan, and he's been posting some good stuff on Twitter and Facebook this week about him, Pittsburgh legend. One of the things that's most interesting to me about Bruno is the falling out he had with the WWF in the 1980s, and it was largely due to steroid use in the company and drug use being rampant in the company, and this really put him at odds with Vince McMahon for the next 20 plus years. And I find that period fascinating because Bruno was a big guy, but he was not a steroid user. Apparently his children were, including David, which kind of put him at odds with his kids in later years. I think he had no relationship with David, if I'm not mistaken, after word came out about David's steroid use. And then obviously one of Bruno's biggest rivals, superstar Billy Graham, who was a big steroid user. So you've got the clashing of the two superstars of the 1960s and Bruno, and the late 70s and I guess middle 70s too, and superstar Billy Graham. So there's kind of a big contrast there in how professional wrestling really changed from the 60s to the 80s. And when you see Bruno and Billy Graham side by side, that kind of represents that big change in wrestling going into the 1980s when you had the big hulked up guys. So
yeah, pardon the pun.
Yeah, pardon the pun, exactly.
Yeah, well, Graham was certainly kind of like the transition from the two eras, you could say. I mean, Graham, everyone, take a drink every time you hear someone say Billy Graham was ahead of his time, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, Bruno, it was funny. He was brought back as a commentator. He did championship wrestling. And then I always found it odd, I had forgotten sometimes that how long he lasted doing Superstars with Vince and Jesse, because he would be so oddly quiet. Like he would never talk during the entire hour broadcast, except a couple times. Like it would almost be like Vince and Jesse would have to speak to him directly. Like, hey, Bruno, what do you think of that? It was bizarre. And, it probably had a lot to do with the fact that by that time, David had already washed out and Bruno just probably didn't want to be there and whatever. But yeah, that period, it's so odd when you read about, how upset he was with the direction and his relationship with, Vince McMahon Jr., that he was in that position so long that he would just, when I listen to Vince and Bruno on commentary, I can't help but think, what's going through Bruno's head right here? Like, I mean, how professional were they with each other? I mean, because they were a team from like 85 into 88.
Yeah.
And it's just odd that, they were able to do that and come across as professional. You wouldn't know really that there was that animosity just by listening to them on commentary.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Superstar Billy Graham needs to take a page out of Bruno's book and maybe stay a little bit quiet right now. He's had some bad takes recently.
Billy, God bless his soul, has kind of had a career of bad takes sometimes, Mm-hmm. Including with Bruno. I actually interviewed a buddy of mine. Reminded me that in a previous podcasting life, I interviewed Bruno Sammartino. I sadly forgotten all about that. And at the time, and I hate this, I cannot remember what the controversy was, but Billy Graham, it's ironic that Justin just brought his name up, said something pretty stupid about Bruno and his family that he probably shouldn't have. And God, I wish I could remember what the commentary was about. But yeah, I remember interviewing him at the time. Bruno was a super nice guy. It was probably the only time in my life I've ever been nervous to interview somebody. All due respect to Liam from England.
Yeah.
But, there's, you talk about recommendations. There's a pretty solid collection on the network right now people could check out with all the 70s stuff. And, as much as he hated Bruno himself, that 85 to 87 return, again, it's odd that he did some good stuff in there, with Piper, the infamous Boston Garden match, which I know Ryan Drosty should be creaming over, because it was the Bears had just beaten the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're working the Boston, everyone associates Bruno with MSG, but he was he was widely popular all over the Northeast, including Boston. And Piper, it's a cage match with Bruno, and Piper tapes all these Chicago Bears posters on the cage, and the crowd heat is like insane.
How have I never seen this?
You've never seen that?
I have never seen this.
It's on the network. It's February 86, Boston Garden.
Oh,
I'm almost 99% sure it's February. They did a 3-month feud at Boston Garden. There was like a tag match involving Orndorff and Orton. But I'm 99.9% sure it's February of 86. It's the main event. I know that show's on the network. Wow. Piper, he tapes up like Refrigerator Perry, Jim McMahon posters, and like the crowd is like going batshit. So,
Kyle, you remember what I said to you when we were walking in the Superdome at Mania, don't you? I
commented stupid about the Chicago Bears, probably.
This was holy ground. This is where the Bears won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Bruno had that inclusion. I mentioned that before. There was that tag team cage match, which I love. Him and Tito against Adrian Adonis and Randy Savage. And he actually, people forget about this, had a small role in that famous Randy Savage Ricky Steamboat angle where Savage dropped the bell on Steamboat. It was something they rarely ever showed again after it happened, but Savage cuts this incredible promo at the end of the show where he starts asking for the ketchup and mustard to put on the hot dog, Ricky Steamboat. And Sammartino genuinely looks upset and just goes, "You slime, you," and just starts choking Savage against the wall. It's something, you can find it on YouTube. That is not on the network. But it's great stuff.
I did find, this is from 4 or 5 years ago, there was a list put together when Bruno went into the WWE Hall of Fame. Someone on Bleacher Report here, Travis Taylor, it looks like. He wrote a piece on the 5 best Bruno Sammartino matches. And he's got at the top of the list Bruno and Superstar Billy Graham from 1977. I'm not sure if it's on the network or not. Looks like it's in August of 77. I guess Graham had defeated Sammartino in April to end his second title reign. And then this is a rematch from August. And supposedly it's one of his best matches.
I believe I read in the Meltzer bio, Graham is the only guy to ever beat Bruno in a cage match.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I was thinking a second ago about talking about the animosity and them doing commentary between Bruno and Vince. And there was, speaking of the Observer, there was a good story in there about when Dave was on, I think, the Donahue show.
Oh, that was a really good story. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen this years and years ago, but I got to look this up again. But it was all about like the drug and sex scandal going on with the WWF in the early 90s, like 92. And Dave's there, and he's supposed to be like the calm voice, the journalist. And he talks about it in the issue of the Observer this week, how they had got like their seating chart before the show. And I guess Bruno was supposed to sit side by side with Vince McMahon. And the backstory is Bruno and Vince were on Larry King before this, a few months prior, I think. And I guess Vince was just lying through his teeth about what was going on in his company. And Bruno was actually telling the truth, but King kind of sided with Vince, and it really pissed off Bruno. And so when they get to the Donahue show, and Bruno was supposed to sit side by side with Vince McMahon, he told the people, like, I can't sit next to him because if he lies, I can't promise you that I won't punch him right then and there. So
and I love Dave. He's like, well, yeah, I don't care what he says. I won't hit him.
Yeah, so Dave
Or
sits
something like
next to
that.
Vince McMahon instead. He volunteered to move. So I thought that was funny. Pretty interesting story. But Bruno did make amends with the WWE. Obviously, was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2013, I believe. And far too late, probably. But, like we said, he was on the outs with the company. I remember when Mike Tyson came in '98, and they were always asking him who his favorite wrestling stars were. And he would always say Bruno Sammartino. That was like the first name. And even at that time, I knew that Bruno and WWF were not on good terms. And it was always kind of funny to hear him. That was always his first response. Bruno Sammartino. Bruno Sammartino.
I think the Raw where they did the famous Austin Tyson pull apart, that Vince asked him that question, and Tyson yelled out, Bruno Sammartino, and Vince is just so awkwardly sitting there like, okay, and moving on to my next question.
All right, well, that's Bruno Sammartino, guys. Definitely check out his work on the WWE Network. Do some reading. Check out this week's Observer. I don't think you will regret it. All right, so we've got to talk this WWE Superstar Shakeup that happened this week and how it impacted Raw and SmackDown. I have some pretty strong opinions of that. I wrote an article this week kind of talking about on popculture.com who came out ahead, Raw or SmackDown. And I think...
Here we go.
I think most of our listeners think SmackDown came out way ahead, just judging by our poll we put up on the Twitter account, @TopRopePod. I also think SmackDown came out far ahead, which is interesting because in the last few months, I think Raw has been the better show. Up until Daniel Bryan's return, at least. And when we started the brand split, SmackDown was kind of in it at the beginning. And then SmackDown was for sure the better show for quite a while. But then over the last, I would say since last summer or so, Raw has been the better broadcast. But recently, SmackDown's recaptured some steam. And now with the pickups they had this week on Monday and Tuesday night, I don't see how SmackDown isn't the A show. But I'm going to go right away to Kyle because it sounds like you got some strong opinions on this.
No, I actually don't have strong opinions on it, which is ironic. But
I thought maybe you disagreed with my article the way you texted me about it earlier today.
No, it was... so I'm just looking at it differently, I think, than most people. So in the sense that most people listening to the show, including the people doing the show, generally prefer the people that went to SmackDown and don't like the people that went from SmackDown to Raw, okay, yeah, you can say SmackDown, quote unquote, won. But I'm looking at a big picture here and saying I just agree with what the WWE did. Because if you look at the lay of the land, and we're not doing brand-only pay-per-views anymore, okay, there's no reason for SmackDown to have a mid-card anymore. Like, none. They just, they didn't do a good job of having a mid-card when they had their own brand pay-per-views anyway. So when I'm watching Raw on Monday and I see, again, guys that I generally maybe don't particularly care for, like Dolph Ziggler or something, or like Natalya going to Raw, I'm like, you know what? Okay, yeah, it's a lot of dead weight, it seems, at the surface going over Raw, but it makes sense because it's a 3-hour show and you almost just have to send these people to Raw because, if you've got a writing team on SmackDown that hasn't really used them, maybe doesn't want to use them, well, it's logical to go to Raw just to maybe get something out of them, breathe some new life. So with SmackDown, I figured, look, you've got a tag team division, you've got a women's division. You only need like 8 or 9 guys at the top, and that's it. Just make sure they're all pretty strong, and that's what they did. And I completely agree with how the WWE shook up the two rosters. You just, kind of take all the, leftovers from SmackDown, put them on Raw. Vince is high on Corbin. Maybe you can get something out of him. I think Jinder might thrive on Raw. I know people are going to roll their eyes at that, but there's certainly a lot of upward mobility there. I think what they did made sense for both shows. I don't think Raw necessarily lost. They took a lot of guys that we don't like from SmackDown, but I don't call that a loss necessarily.
I think what you're saying really makes sense too in the context of what I wrote in the column, because I said a lot of the guys going to Raw were kind of like rehab projects, whereas like they had kind of bottomed out.
You did say that, yeah.
Yeah, they kind of bottomed out, or they weren't riding as high as maybe they were in the past, or they're just like consistent mid-carders, whereas the guys that went to SmackDown are more guys that can main event now or hot names right now, which I didn't really think of it the way that you put it, Kyle, but that makes sense because, yeah, you're right. On SmackDown, you got the shorter show. It's harder to be a mid-carder and make a difference on the show, whereas Raw has the extra hour. They got more time, and it makes more sense for Raw to be the show where you kind of rehab guys and you turn them into something again.
Kyle Ross trying to apply logic to pro wrestling. He's just the worst, I'm telling you.
Love the sport.
Were your thoughts, Justin, that SmackDown came out on top right away?
Well, I mean, now that Kyle's kind of ruined the whole Mark aspect of it, yeah, I definitely thought they came out with. Well, I'll put it this way: they came out with the superstars I'm more interested in watching. My biggest takeaway, the shocker, is the tag team division on SmackDown, and the fact that, for one, they didn't break up the Usos and New Day. And I don't know where all that's going, especially when you bring over The Bar and the Good Brothers, who, I mean, obviously I think hardcore fans have a higher opinion of than the WWE does. But, yeah, I mean, Samoa Joe, and what's lost in this, I think a little bit, is Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn going to Raw. I think those are probably the two biggest stars that actually moved. But I'm interested in what they're going to do.
Yeah,
we're going to see.
As far as the tag team ranks too, you also got Sanity called up, so that's another team in the tag team division on SmackDown that can do some things. I was, pretty pleasantly surprised when I saw that Almas had been called up with Zelina Vega, because I think there's some big time things ahead for those two on SmackDown.
Yes.
You got The Miz on SmackDown now, who is, as we talked about in the show, constantly one of the best heels presently and maybe ever in the company. Jeff Hardy's pretty hot right now. Joe is really on a different level right now since his return. Man, that promo he cut on Roman Reigns was excellent on the night after WrestleMania. His promo on SmackDown was pretty good.
Especially if you're looking to eviscerate Roman Reigns.
Oh, man.
Especially if you want to make sure Roman Reigns isn't going to get over like you want him to, then that is a great promo by Samoa Joe.
Yeah. We're going to have probably eventually, after the whole thing with Nakamura wraps up, which, by the way, Nakamura reinventing himself. I think Kyle
Love
is
Shinsuke Nakamura.
Kyle is now on the Shinsuke bandwagon.
Doing the best work of his career the last 2 weeks.
The low blows. Amazing.
I may actually vote in Meltzer's awards at the end of 2018, and my favorite move is going to be Shinsuke Nakamura punching AJ Styles in the balls. There's just no better move in pro wrestling right now.
The way he just holds it and the facials he makes are just hilarious.
He just loves punching AJ Styles in the frickin' Jacobs, man.
You know what I could not stop thinking about is how we've talked about this on the show with Shinsuke when he was a face, about how he shouldn't be talking. He shouldn't be doing interviews because it makes him look goofy. The fans don't connect. But the way they're doing it now as a heel on Tuesday night, where he did the no speak English, freaking perfect. I loved that. That was just amazing. I couldn't help but think back to our conversations here.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'll throw it to you guys. Looking back, it's only been, what now, 2 weeks? Not even. Is Nakamura's heel turn, everyone, the big story coming out of Styles Nakamura, oh, what a disappointing match. But is his heel turn, storyline-wise, maybe the most relevant thing to come out of WrestleMania? In terms of, like, if you missed WrestleMania, like, this was kind of like a notable change in the narrative of something. Like, really, when you think about it, nothing else that happened at that show. I mean, you could talk about Roman not winning, but that's a negative, I think. We can talk
Same
about
with
that more later. But
Asuka.
or Asuka, or you're right, Asuka's streak. But in terms of something that's had a positive impact on the company that happened that night, I think you got to go with the Nakamura heel turn right now.
Yeah, definitely. It breathed new life into him for sure.
It's something else I want to bring up too, that I think it's totally unfair to like evaluate which brand won this right now. Man, we got 2 pay-per-views coming up in a real short span that are kind of goofy because you've got Raw and SmackDown guys opposing each other on these shows. It's kind of some lame duck matches. I don't think you can properly evaluate this thing until after Backlash and see what the long-term direction is. I mean, that's kind of what I want to get into on the show, is kind of taking inventory of the rosters and where we think this will go. Because, again, yeah, I think SmackDown's got the capability to have a lot of great TV matches every week with that roster. But where do they go? Where does Raw go? I think that's the interesting thing. At this time last year, we knew what the title matches were going to be at WrestleMania in New Orleans. That's what they wound up being. Reigns and Lesnar, Styles and Nakamura. Right now, I don't think we know what the big money matches are for WrestleMania. I mean, okay, you can talk about Rousey, but as far as the men's world title matches, your guess is as good as mine. I would assume Reigns would be a factor on Raw and Daniel Bryan on SmackDown. But, there's room for guys to step up.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the direction is going to be where they go with Joe, because everyone's going to be anticipating this Joe Styles match, as on fire as Joe is right now. But Nakamura and Styles have this program going on that they can't turn off right now. So
and Joe is booked to work Reigns at Backlash,
right,
in what could be potentially a lame duck Raw or Universal title match, depending on what happens with Reigns and Lesnar at Greatest Royal Rumble ever.
Do we think Reigns is going to win the title? What are your guys' thoughts on that? The long pause.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think, God, what was it? It was like I don't know if it's 6 months ago or whatnot, but Kyle said that he wished they would just pull the trigger, give him his run, which, now I'm at the same point. Actually, no, I'm not at the same point. I'm at the point where it's like, you had your chances. You need to move on. You need to change something with Roman Reigns. I'm tired of the fans shitting on him and ruining my, viewing of wrestling. But if I had to put money on it, yeah, I think Reigns is going to win the title, I guess.
I don't know, because this is the way they've done it is so poor, in that the way that Mania match was booked, there was no reason to do this rematch. And again, the booking is doing Roman Reigns no favors here, because it's basically like, well, the promotion is just giving him another shot.
Yeah.
And I just don't like this setup at all. I mean, they really, really, really should have just pulled the trigger at WrestleMania. And I don't know. Really, does it make sense? I mean, what do you do with Brock Lesnar then, I guess, if he has more than one match left on his deal?
Doesn't it almost feel like if Reigns wins the title, they're kind of wasting an opportunity at this point? Like we've talked about, that if the time has passed with Reigns, the way they've delayed it, when Brock finally drops this title, he's had it so long that it is going to be a huge moment. Is it a waste to have Reigns be on the receiving end at this point?
I don't know who the person is then that beats
I don't either.
Lesnar if it's not Reigns. They've really put themselves into a corner. I mean, the more and more I think about it, I guess I'm not answering your question at all, which was a very fair and good question to ask. Who do you think is going to win that match? when I think about that question, all I think about is how dumb it was what they did at WrestleMania. That's my answer. I don't know. It was dumb what they did at WrestleMania. And now there's no good answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm pretty much right where you guys are, though. I like Reigns. I've been sold on Reigns over the last six months or so. Just like Justin, I'm tired of the fan reaction, and I wish he'd just kind of get the title, get the run, get it out of the way, see what happens. But at the same time, man, just so many delays that I just don't see how it can work as presently constructed. I felt like it could maybe work with the win at Mania, but man, after they beat him there, I don't see it anymore. They've got to have some kind of crazy change, and I don't know what they're gonna do.
The thing is, I do assume Roman Reigns is going to end up as the Universal Champion.
Oh yeah,
and I assume it's going to be the same thing where, he's a babyface being rejected by the majority of the fans. And what's interesting is looking at the roster, there are not a lot of strong heels on the Raw side. I know Justin mentioned, they did get Owens and Zayn. Look, I do not want to see them as the featured heels on a brand. Again, SmackDown was bad with them in that role. I certainly don't want to see them as the foils of Roman Reigns, for God's sake. Please. Do
Kyle
not do
Ross
that.
heel turn. Kyle Ross heel turn right here on the pod.
I think Dean Ambrose would be a solid top heel on Raw when he comes back.
That's funny. I had that in my notes down the line. He's an X factor right now because he could come back at a time where Roman's the Universal Champion and Seth's the IC Champion. And where does he turn heel on one or both of them? I think there is some logic there, and I can see that happening.
What if we get a Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Universal versus IC Champion match at SummerSlam? I could see that.
Well, the thing that's funny is shallow as the heel side, I think, is on Raw. This babyface side is deep. You got Braun Strowman, Bobby Lashley, Seth Rollins, your boy Finn Balor. I mean, that's a strong top five. Bobby Roode, by the way, we've been beating this drum forever. My God, given the lay of the land that we're kind of talking here, he really needs to turn heel now because he's got no chance to be a major player on the babyface side, but there's certainly room for him to grow were he to turn heel. And he's an uninteresting babyface to boot, so...
Yeah, I think Bobby Lashley has lost a lot in just the week he's been back. I think he's quite a bit below some of those other names that you mentioned. I already sense that the interest is dying in Bobby Lashley. I don't know what Justin's thoughts are on that, but I don't see a lot of interest in Bobby Lashley personally.
Bobby Lashley happened while I was kind of out on wrestling back in WrestleMania 23. Wasn't really paying attention back then, and I don't watch TNA. So, for somebody as an observer who doesn't know anything about him, he doesn't do a lot for me yet.
Well, suppose a lot of people thought he was going to be wrestling Lesnar because they both had the MMA stuff, but apparently that is not in the plans at all. So,
well, that was according to Dave. I mean, stick to the bios, Dave. Sometimes. So.
Well, I do think Bobby Lashley is definitely a tier below, like Rollins and Balor, for example, the names that you've mentioned.
Rollins is probably doing the best work of his career right now. I got to say that. Seth had a problem. The way they did the babyface turn was clunky initially. That they didn't. Remember, they tried to get the fans to boo him really hard when he came back. Mm-hmm. This was 2 years ago when they first did the brand split, and then they wound up turning him babyface 2 months later. It was real clunky. He had issues initially connecting, and I think it was kind of personality-wise. But right now, he's never been better, in my opinion, Seth Rollins.
I think his 2015 is pretty hard to top, though, don't you think?
I didn't like him in that heel role at all.
But as far as his work in the ring, man, he was carrying those shows.
I think he's he had. I think his work this year's, but he's had some great TV matches, man.
Yeah.
I just, to me right now, as an all-around performer, I think Seth Rollins is at his best right now, as we speak.
And going on to Lashley, sorry to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
He did get better in TNA. He did.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's just like Drew McIntyre. He was a guy pushed too hard too soon in WWE. Then they gave up. Well, actually, that's not fair. Lashley was a different situation. He quit. But, he got better. I expect big things from Bobby Lashley, personally.
But you don't think that the fan interest in Bobby Lashley is close to Rollins or Balor at this moment, do you?
I don't know. I think it's grossly unfair to make that comment after 2 weeks.
Well, I think it'd be unfair to make it several weeks from now. But right now, I just don't think he can possibly be on that level just because he's been gone for so long. Virtually nobody watches TNA wrestling. And sorry to any of our listeners that watch it. I'm not bashing it. It's just the fact. Like, not many people watch Impact Wrestling.
I think if done right, his ceiling can be higher than both of those guys.
Okay, but at this moment, he's not on that level. Like, Balor is massively popular with the audience, regardless of things that have been said on this podcast. He is. We saw that in New Orleans. Justin walking down Bourbon Street in that Balor Club hoodie, everywhere. Comments on Finn Balor. I think Finn Balor is super popular with the crowd. His time on the main roster definitely has been disappointing since coming back from the injury, but I think he's recouped a lot of his popularity and momentum in recent weeks. So
it kind of sucks for him because, like I said, he's a guy who really could use one of those secondary titles, but it's really, really hard to argue against Seth Rollins right now because he's more over than Finn Balor.
Oh, Rollins? Yeah, I think Rollins is too. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you're right, though, as far as like the heel face dynamic. The heels on Raw definitely leave a little bit to be desired.
I want to bring this back to something because we kind of left something open. And Justin made a comment to me when I poo-pooed the idea of Owens and Zayn on top opposing Reigns. He said he made some comment about me doing a heel turn there, and I kind of wanted to know what he meant by that.
Oh, well, as a mark.
I like how you're taking on the resident Mark storyline now.
Yeah, I'm going to own it. I already pinned that badge on my Boy Scout shirt or however that works.
Next to the Tiger Cup badge on the other side.
Yeah. I think those are guys that...
Oh, God, you can't possibly want them at the top of another brand.
Absolutely.
God, here we go. Pandora's box has been opened. Oh, my goodness, here we go.
How are you not entertained by those two? Those two... To me, like, you were complaining about them being on SmackDown when they were the only thing making it interesting to watch.
Oh, God, they were even making that a drag.
No, no, that was
so bad in that.
Dude,
role.
no, that was who was ever writing the story. I think they were making the most out of that. That segment with the Miztourage on Monday was fantastic. And Sammy reading Stephanie's note.
No, that was good. But
we're talking about these performers, right? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about their awful 6 months on SmackDown as the lead heels.
And I don't think that can be on them. That's not on them. Like, I think they made that watchable.
Ugh.
I'm gonna have to lean towards Justin's side on this one. I have really liked it. I think Sami Zayn has been freshened up a lot by the heel turn.
I hate them as heel. Kevin Owens should be a babyface, in my opinion. He's another guy to my dying day needs to be a babyface. The problem with Owens and Zayn as heels. First of all, they did what I knew they were going to do, and I think it's such lazy storytelling. And this is not Owens and Zayn's fault in that they had them lose. They had them in a stipulation where if you lose, you're fired, but they just go to Raw. That's like so fucking lame.
I got a hard disagreement with you on Kevin Owens. And you think Kevin Owens should be a face?
Yes.
Oh.
Because here's the thing: the crowd didn't want them to leave the show, but they get cheered. I think they're playing what they think is a good heel, but the crowd likes Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn.
Yeah, but we can't say that and then turn around and say the crowd reaction doesn't matter with Roman Reigns.
Oh, I think it does. It does matter.
Because we've said with Roman Reigns though that like they wouldn't turn him heel, but it doesn't really matter because they don't really see heels and faces anymore. They just want a reaction. So then we can't criticize Kevin Owens for that.
I think it's different with Reigns in that position. I think they view Reigns as like John Cena. They want Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn to be traditional heels.
Yeah,
and
Go ahead.
I don't think they're great in that role. I don't.
Man, I think Owens is such a good heel. I got to disagree. I think, to me, okay, go back and watch when the night Bryan announced he was returning to the ring, and when Owens and Zayn attacked him, just watch Owens in that segment. He is so good. He is such a good heel. The way, like his facial reactions and the way he was like tormented at what he was doing to Bryan, but like he knew he had to do it, and he was pulling his hair out, and oh my God, he was so good that night. So good.
If it was not for Daniel Bryan, I wouldn't have gave two rats patooies about that segment.
Oh, you don't think Owens was great in that segment? I thought he was unbelievable.
Daniel Bryan, I think, brought all the heat.
but the way that Owens acted out the whole thing,
he did the same thing the week before with Shane McMahon, and no one really cared.
I mean, the way they built it up, though, the intricacies with this program was that they had this history. These were the guys that were like the king of the indies, and then the way that I just loved it. The way that they were on the same page.
There was a lot of retconning. Like, they made it work in the end because Daniel Bryan wrestled, but I think on a week-to-week, the storytelling made no sense and was not an enjoyable watch.
Yeah, but that's not. I mean, again, that's not on Kevin Owens. That's the writing team. That's your boy, the Road Dogg.
Oh, you didn't know? And look, I'll be honest with you. Kevin Owens has been the lead heel on the inferior show both years. Like when SmackDown was better than Raw, Kevin Owens was the lead heel on Raw. When Raw was better than SmackDown, Kevin Owens was the lead heel on SmackDown.
But I'm kind of like Justin was saying, though. I feel like that goes beyond Kevin. I feel like Kevin Owens was the only thing worth watching on the shows at the time. Like he was carrying SmackDown, and on Raw, he was the best part of Raw when Raw was down, too. I feel like it was more about what was around him.
But shouldn't the show be better then if he's good?
Well, imagine it without him.
The Festival of Friendship was one of the greatest Raw moments of all time.
Yeah, that was, well, I mean, that might be a little strong, but it was very good, yes. It was well built, too. I mean, because it was something that took time and whatnot, but I don't know. I do not want to see Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn on top opposing Roman. That, to me, is actually the least appealing. When I look at these names on Raw, that's the least appealing thing that you could probably do.
Man, I can't wait to choke slam Kyle Ross next time I see him. I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you who I can't wait to see in that top heel role is a Jinder Mahal or a Baron Corbin. Those are guys who I'm rooting for at post-Superstar Shakeup.
You have got to be doing a bit at this point.
Oh,
come on.
I actually think, believe it or not, all right, part of that was performance art. But legitimately, I think when you look at potential winners on Raw from the Superstar Shakeup, those are the two names that I if you're looking for guys who stand to gain the most on Raw post Shakeup, those are the names I would legitimately submit to you. They say Vince is high on Corbin. Maybe because they weren't. I mean, Jinder was doing stuff on SmackDown. Obviously, he kind of had his spot, but Corbin was doing nothing. And those two guys are going to get pushed because when you look at this heel side beyond Brock Lesnar, man, there just isn't much. Like Elias, okay, he's over and people like his spots, but there's a ceiling to that act, I think. And beyond the guys we've mentioned, I mean, you got Mojo Rawley, again, a guy who it's good that he moved because he wasn't doing anything on SmackDown. But after that, I mean, they don't have anyone on the heel side.
You wouldn't really rather see Jinder Mahal as the top heel versus Kevin Owens, would you?
I'll tell you what. People always talk about, these casual fans. I know what these casual fans want. Let me tell you something. Do you know who was very intrigued by Jinder Mahal? my wife, actually went to Wikipedia when we watched that Jeff Hardy Jinder Mahal match, which by the way was very good on Raw. I thought that was a really good TV match. And her comments on when the match started were, Jeff Hardy, she didn't know. She's like, that guy looks like Vanilla Ice crossed with a magician. And Jinder looks like one of your action figures in the basement. People want hard body Jinder, man. I'm telling you.
Then why didn't they buy the tickets in India to see him?
I don't know.
I can't believe you would actually. You can't obviously think that Jinder Mahal, the ceiling's higher for him than Kevin Owens, do you?
No,
Okay.
but I think Jinder is a better modern heel than Kevin Owens.
Okay.
Kevin Owens is a better all-around performer. I see big things. Like if they would make Kevin Owens into an everyman babyface, and they wouldn't even. This is my point about Kevin Owens as a heel. If they made him a babyface and said, "You're a babyface now," and he didn't change hardly any of his current shtick, I think it would be infinitely more enjoyable if he was presented in a as a babyface instead of a heel, with all like the jokes and stuff. You know, like again, I've brought this up before. When you heel on Michael Cole, you're not being a heel; you're being a babyface.
Yeah, I think he's kind of in between there, though. I think they know that the internet crowd loves Kevin Owens, but they don't care. He still plays a heel. I don't know. I think as his best work is as a heel character. I can't imagine him really as a baby face. I just can't. I can't see.
I would every man baby face. You know, hey, he looks like the people in the crowd, man. And there's nothing wrong with that.
You want him to be Dusty Rhodes? You're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, should we talk about the women's division? That was kind of on our agenda, Raw and SmackDown, because the SmackDown women's division is loaded right now. Absolutely loaded when you add Asuka to the mix. You got her and Charlotte on that side together. You got Becky Lynch, who criminally underutilized, but she's still there, right? Raw, Alexa Bliss, obviously, very good. Got Nia Jax holding the title.
A lot of talk about Alexa Bliss on Twitter.com today.
What was that? What's that about? I saw something. I saw some tweet she made, but
I'm not bringing it up publicly. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to get sued.
Oh God!
You've already turned heel this podcast. You just as well say it.
I have no idea. I actually have no idea.
All you got to do is do some searching, and you'll find out what I'm talking about.
All right, we'll just leave that hanging for our listeners to Google themselves and see.
Yes.
Well, what do you think, though? Raw and SmackDown, the women's divisions. They moved Mandy Rose, your girl, over to SmackDown to reunite with Paige, who, by the way, Mandy has been looking a lot better in the ring of late since when she was first called up. I think she's been doing a lot better job. So we got the Riot Squad moving over to Raw. Your thoughts?
I was a little surprised that they didn't, with Paige kind of backing away from Absolution and just being the GM. I'm surprised they didn't split up Sonya and Mandy, to be honest with you. I thought that was a time to do it, but it'll be interesting to see if they kind of link them still to her in the GM role now that they're on the same brand. I think both women's rosters are in pretty good shape, quite frankly. I think the interesting thing is that NXT is pretty barren right now with all the call-ups that have taken place over the last, year to 18 months. My God. I mean, that was kind of the scuttlebutt, when people were like, oh, Nikki Cross isn't coming up with the rest of Sanity. I think they just need some capable bodies down there to challenge Shayna.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think the men's roster is loaded in NXT, but yeah, the women's roster is very depleted. You're right.
But let me bring that roster back up here, and because I was actually surprised they didn't move Sasha and Bayley both to SmackDown because of like how it's sort of the best friends, former best friends now feuding is essentially a copycat of the feud on top on Raw, Nia and Alexa. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really hamstrung Sasha and Bayley, quite frankly. I was expecting them to maybe move over to SmackDown. So I think they actually might if anyone's quote unquote hurt by the Superstar Shakeup, it might be them by staying on Raw.
Yeah, that's true. They still haven't done the Bayley heel turn that we were so sure they were going to do. Hasn't happened.
Yeah. And the Ember Moon, where does she fit in right now? I mean, she's kind of being positioned as strong. I would imagine her to be in the title mix moving forward. That's another name on Raw that, it's hard for me to imagine her working Nia in a babyface program.
Yeah. Well, I could totally see them on SmackDown when you talked about Sonya and Mandy. Doing kind of a similar storyline in nature of like the two best friends breaking up that they did with Alexa and Nia. Because if you follow Sonya and Mandy on like Instagram or Twitter or anything, they travel everywhere together. They live together. So eventually that's definitely going to be a thing, is they're going to split for sure. But I think they'll draw that out a long time.
That's a lot of best friends splitting up, especially because we haven't even mentioned the key name on the Raw women's side, Ronda Rousey. Hello.
Yeah.
They're very clearly going to do a thing where Natty Neidhart turns on her.
Mm-hmm.
Like that looks to be her next program, which is, I guess, something to do, a placeholder for. It's kind of underwhelming in terms of Ronda Rousey, but whatever. I mean, Natty, I guess, is someone they can trust to work with her at this point and get kind of a competent match at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I think I'd rate the SmackDown roster of women slightly ahead, but I think the women's side on both is pretty strong. I would agree.
Well, I think SmackDown, you can see where they're going more. I mean, you've got Carmella as the champion. She just beat Charlotte. I can smell them. Oh, you didn't know 6-man tags coming with Becky, Charlotte, and Asuka against Carmella and the Iconics.
Mm-hmm.
And then Naomi's kind of the wild card. I don't really know how I feel about her, kind of being the uneasy, significant other to the that didn't do a lot of favors to the Usos, that angle, I didn't think.
Mm-hmm.
When she came down and was like all concerned in that Bludgeon Brothers match. I don't know if that's the best use of Naomi, and I certainly don't know if it does the Usos any favors. But Raw, I don't know where they go with the title, to be honest with you. I told, on the WrestleMania preview show, I said I thought they should have waited for Nia to win. They should stretch that out because, now they're just going to do rematches with Alexa, and I don't think Alexa should win the title back, so that's whatever. And then I don't know who's Nia's program after Alexa Bliss, I guess is the question.
I guess they could do like Ruby Riott eventually, but not right now. I have no idea. That's a good question. Yeah, I'm not seeing one that jumps out at me right now.
I don't know, Justin. I mean, is it going to be, girl Mickey James? I mean, it ain't going to be Alicia Fox. I'm telling you that much. After some of her WrestleMania shenanigans.
Yeah, I got nothing. The Raw. Well, I mean, Bayley and Sasha, one of them could maybe grab it. I mean,
yeah, that's the real wild card on the Raw side, where they go with the Bayley Sasha thing, because it's fluttered. The match got off to a real shaky start Monday night when Bayley blew that spot. Like, my eyes closed. I said, "Oh fuck, these two are in trouble now." But they kind of got them back, and then they did the thing with the Riot Squad. So that's another thing. I don't know. Like, the Riot Squad attacked them both. So how does that? The Raw does not have the sort of easy to view path that SmackDown does.
No, I think again, you don't have the heels to work against Nia. Like, outside of Alexa Bliss, you don't have credible heels to really get title shots, and it's another reason why Bayley as a heel would be really good right now, because yeah, you're right, Nia just doesn't have anyone to work with. I think Ruby was established fairly well in that feud with Charlotte on SmackDown.
Yeah, I could see her kind of being like a stopgap.
Yeah, but otherwise you're looking at face programs constantly with Nia. So, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see where it goes. So, Anything else on the Superstar Shakeup you guys wanted to discuss?
Didn't really hit the tag team situation here. I think.
Well, we talked SmackDown being very strong. We didn't really talk Raw.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that I talked about with those, kind of. We've got these 2 pay-per-views coming up, and you've got some odd matchups in the wake of the Superstar Shakeup. The Raw tag team title match in Saudi Arabia is like the most lame duck thing ever because the Bar is in it, but they're on SmackDown.
Yeah.
So like Hardy and Wyatt are obviously winning, which makes sense. It's not like, they shouldn't win, but they're obviously winning. But I don't know how long-term that is. Authors of Pain are probably the long-term or I wouldn't say probably, I would almost say definitely the long-term answer is Raw Tag Champions. There. Well, I think that's pretty easy to deduce, in my opinion.
The thing is with the matchups at the Greatest Royal Rumble and Backlash, there's all sorts of ways for WWE to mix and match titles. Well, I guess outside of the tag teams, that'd be weird to have the SmackDown titles on Raw, which, you know what? Now that I think about it, why not? Let's just do that.
Well, yeah, but the problem is they have the belts colored and stuff. Like, I don't know. I feel that there was not a ton of quality control in some of that thought process. It's really weird that the Bar, asked, for this title to get their titles back, and then they'd be shipped off. That kind of actually makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, they can always change that leather on the titles. Just look at the Ultimate Warrior and his title runs. Always had to do a different color.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying is the Greatest Royal Rumble is kind of a dud as a card then because of some of the matches just being
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't. Well, I think some stuff on the undercard. I expect at least one of the either the Universal or the WWE title to change hands on that show, because Nakamura has to win the title to justify the heel turn.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I could see that happening. I could still see Reigns beating Lesnar. So I mean, it's probably one or both, and then you've got some big matches. This Undertaker Rusev situation is
Rusev is back. He's back in the match, baby.
Yeah, that's very interesting. They're still shoehorning him into that heel role. That's a guy who should not be a heel. Again, another guy should be a babyface.
I agree on that one for sure, 100%.
Well, I don't know who wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess it is a good card. It's just we've been saying the match results seem fairly obvious for some of the matches, but then again, you never know. We thought the same thing going into WrestleMania, and look what we ended up with. So,
yeah, I mean, because the IC title has guys from both brands, and they might be adding Lashley to it. I just read before we went on the air, and then the US title is a SmackDown and Raw guy again. It's Jinder and Jeff Hardy. So, they're probably almost certainly not changing that title,
right?
Unless they do.
That is true.
Unless they do.
I mean, I guess maybe there is no point to have a second show. I mean, I talked about it. There's no point to having a mid-card on SmackDown anymore. Maybe they just put both mid-card titles on Raw. I don't think they're going to do that, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah. Well, the other thing we never talked about, guys, that I thought about on the show last week after we signed off, we never even talked about the Andre the Giant documentary. And I know we could probably go on for a half hour about it, but we never even discussed it last week, and I don't know how that happened. I'm assuming, I know Justin's seen it. Kyle, have you seen it?
Yep.
Were you as impressed as we were?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I didn't.
That's the least surprising reaction I've ever heard.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was good. It was real good. I mean, I wasn't blown away by it or anything.
I really liked. I mean, you had your typical Hulk Hogan just bullshitting stories. like there's no freaking way he went into WrestleMania 3 not knowing if he was going to win or not as he's in the ring.
I know that's shameful. I mean, Hulk, just stop it. And of course, you had Vince McMahon just talking about what an epic event it was when Andre farted. That was the other real gem there.
Yeah, I think I blocked that out of my memory. That was
somebody should have asked him. Who had this? Was it more epic when Andre farted or when Natty farted? I think that should have been the follow-up question. I think to that.
Oh God. Yeah.
You know, but in all honesty, do you know what kind of hurt the documentary for me going into it? Because I didn't watch it live, is that there was such a negative reaction on my Twitter timeline to David Shoemaker.
Yeah,
that, like,
I had the same thing. Yep.
Yeah, I was rolling my eyes every time he talked. So, like, God bless the guy. I think there's just some of it is there's a lot of people on Twitter who think they know more, and they probably do know more. They could do a better job than Shoemaker. But whatever, David Shoemaker's friends with Bill Simmons, and Bill Simmons made the documentary. So
there you
that's
go.
why he's...
I am not a Shoemaker hater myself. I do see that on Twitter quite a bit though too. So I thought of it as I was watching it. So listeners, that is your assignment this week. Check out some Bruno Sammartino on the WWE Network and get access to HBO somehow and check out the Andre the Giant documentary.
Oh, I got an assignment too.
Go ahead. Googling Alexa Bliss.
Okay, that's one, but I have a second one that's a little more fun. So as I was doing prep work for this show, I had WCW Saturday Night on. I've been trying to go through those that they just uploaded to the network from '92. I really like that time period from WCW, even though it was doing terrible business and there were booking issues. But they were doing this guest host gimmick to start the show, like some real wild cards, like Jason Hervey, who is one of the all-time worst, gives one of the most all-time bad commentary performances on his show. But Randy Owen from the country group Alabama is on one, okay?
No.
Yes. Okay, and he honestly did the best of any of the guest hosts. But so they would always do these like sit-down segments. They'd bring one of the top guys out and they'd just interview him, and they try to like play it up like kind of like an interview like you'd see on a talk show. Well, anyway, they brought Rick Rude out, and I shit you not, the first question Randy Owen asks Rick Rude is, Rick, I'm a big wrestling fan. I followed your career. I just got to ask you one question. Why did you leave the WWF? Like, I wasn't paying attention, and I just shot up. I'm like, did Randy Owen just fucking ask about the WWF? And Rude, it was obviously a planted question, because Rude just immediately buries the WWF. He's like, yeah, I'm the U.S. champion here. I got world title shots. When I was the Intercontinental title champion there, they would never let me wrestle the world champion. And so that was funny. And then they started asking, it got better. They started asking, like, they went into the crowd to have people ask Rude questions. One woman basically just asked what she had to do to sleep with Rick Rude, which was incredible television. And then they were doing this angle at the time where Ricky Steamboat was like was not the family man that he claimed he was. And this obviously planted fan, like Missy Hyatt, goes up to her and she goes, "Oh, here's a fan who has a question." And this lady's like, "I just want to say that I had an affair with Ricky Steamboat."
Oh, God.
And this other woman comes out, "You too? I had an affair with Ricky Steamboat." They start calling each other sluts.
Oh, what month of '92 is this for the listeners? I believe
it was May 2nd. It was the episode where Austin and Barry Windham wrestle for the TV title. You have to watch. Randy Owen, guest host on WCW Saturday Night. This was one of the most incredible segments I've ever seen in professional wrestling history.
I love it. Oh man. All right, guys. Well, I think we're on that note. We're going to take it home. You've got some some watching to do on the WWE Network for next week to get ready for the show. Maybe we'll address some of these topics. Justin, any closing comments before we sign off for the night?
There's nothing that I could say that would top that Kyle rant there at the end.
Tremendous.
Let's take it home.
One thing you could say: grab a hold, tell a story.
Okay.
I love this sport.
We have a T-shirt, you guys. Kyle's. You wouldn't probably know, it's kind of an inside thing, but grab a hold, tell a story. Kyle loves the quote. We have it on a T-shirt. You can get it at shop.spreadshirt.com/TopRopeNation, which, by the way, we also have Top Rope Nation T-shirts there. Pins, all kinds of stuff. Check it out. Some good stuff. They're always running sales. It'll come across the top banner on the page if there's anything on sale. So check it out. And as always, leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes if you like what you hear. Check out the archives on TopRopeNation.com, and we will be back with you next week.